Anna Roy, Research Associate at the
This meeting is
Organization
being recorded.
for Research on China and Asia. Joining us today for the discussion on this pertinent topic are two esteemed panelists, Ms. Pangyue Cheng and Dr. Heng Wang. Ms. Cheng is an International Fox Fellow at the Yale University Macmillan Center and a doctoral candidate at the Law School of the National University of Singapore. Her research interests include securities and investment law, corporate law, and artificial intelligence law. Ms. Cheng received her master's degree in corporate and financial services law from the National University of Singapore and got her bachelor's degree from Peking Normal University. She has been invited to various academic conferences held by prestigious institutions such as Harvard University, Yale University, and Michigan University, and her works have been published in various law journals. Today, she will be talking about regulatory and other such challenges to the digital Yuan project and how this will affect other payment systems in China. Our second speaker for today is Dr. Heng Wang. Dr. Wang is a professor of law at Yongpang House School of Law at Singapore Management University. Before joining SMU, he was a professor and a founding co-director of the University of New South Wales Law and Justices Herbert Smith Freehills China International Business and Economic Law Center. He was also a founding co-director of the Tsinghua UNSW Joint Research Center for International Commercial and Economic Law. Dr. Wang has advised and spoken at events organized by several international organizations such as APEC, IMF, the World Bank, WTO, Bank for Settlements, and so on. His current research focuses on digitalization, sustainable development, and the future of international economic relationships. Today, Dr. Wang will share his views on the implications of digital yuan on the Chinese economy, as well as on the global economy, especially in the context of global post-pandemic recovery. Both speakers will be in conversation with Mr. Omkar Bhole, Research Associate at ORCA. He is a Chinese language student and has completed his master's in China Studies from Somaiya University, Mumbai. He has completed the HSK4 level of Chinese language proficiency and has previously worked as a Chinese language instructor. His research interests are China's foreign policy in Asia, China's economic transformation, and China's domestic politics. Before I hand over the floor to Omkar for opening remarks, I would like to lay down some housekeeping rules. Both speakers will talk for about 15 minutes, after which the floor will be open for the Q&A session. All participants shall stay muted during the speakers' presentations. Questions can be posted in the chat box anytime during the event, introducing yourself and with the mention of whom the question is addressed to, or you can also use the raise hand option and only unmute yourself when called upon by the organizers to do so. With this, I would now like to invite Omkar to deliver his opening remarks.
Thank you, Ahana, for the warm introduction. On behalf of ORCA, I would like to welcome our panelists and our audience for ORCA's third Expert Scholars Dialogue. The topic for today is of much interest, not just for the China watchers, but also for the global economy enthusiasts, as well as for the business owners. Recent statistics show that more than 110 countries around the world are at the different stages of launching their own central bank digital currencies or CBDCs. Amongst these, small developing countries like Nigeria, Bahamas, and 9 other Caribbean islands have already launched their sovereign digital currencies. China is the front runner in this race among major economies, as it has already been in the pilot stages of its CBDC program, that is Digital Yuan, since 2020, which has assessed the drawbacks of existing Digital Yuan model, as well as facilitate general acceptance among common public about this new technology. The ongoing pilots have already covered 17 provinces and more than 1/5 population of China. Despite such extensive trials and research, which began way back in 2014, China hasn't announced an official date yet for the nationwide launch of Digital Yuan. Thus, it is important to analyze potential challenges that have restricted the government from going beyond the pilot stage. Now, with respect to motivations behind China's efforts to launch a sovereign digital currency, China's existing payment systems have caused several problems for the government to monitor their economic activities effectively. Moreover, under China's dual circulation strategy, as it focuses more on the domestic consumption, the stability on and reliability of payment systems is highly pertinent for China's overall economic stability. In the last few years, China has rapidly transformed into a cashless society. Digital payment systems like mobile payments, cash, card-based transactions have grown rapidly, and the use of physical currency has been going down gradually. 2021 Findex report published by the World Bank suggests that 82% people in China regularly use digital payment systems, and COVID-19 pandemic in the last 3 years have further increased the pace of adoption of digital payment modes in China. Among these systems, mobile payments account for almost two-thirds of total transactions in China. However, the existing duopoly of private companies like Alibaba and Tencent through their respective payment platforms, Alipay and WeChat Pay, it does not fit well into China's state-led economic structure. Further, as these two private companies operate more than 90% of digital payment systems in China, any disruption in these companies can have serious implications for Chinese economy. As a result, Chinese government have issued several regulations to monitor activities of these fintech platforms in the last few years. Similarly, increasing popularity of cryptocurrencies, despite its volatile nature, has compelled many countries around the world, including China, to look for other payment alternatives such as CBDCs. In case of China, digital yuan allows the government to monitor financial activities as it is solely issued by the central bank of the country, that is People's Bank of China. At the same time, it also offers users the convenience provided by other digital payment systems existing at this point of time. However, the launch of digital yuan has its own regulatory challenges in terms of necessary changes required in cybersecurity laws, data protection laws, as well as in the financial laws concerning payment systems in China. The white paper published by People's Bank of China in 2021 clearly mentioned that regulations required for digital yuan need to be made in a manner that balance its status as a fiat currency, which also aids the risk prevention, and it also supports innovative developments in the economy at the same time. Thus, it will be a major challenge for the Chinese government to fit digital yuan in a regulatory setup without affecting its unique features. Further, nationwide launch of digital yuan is also likely to strengthen the implementation of laws governing cryptocurrencies in China. Similarly, wider acceptance of digital currency will also affect regulations of private fintech companies in the future. It is particularly important considering the recent report published by China's CCTV, quoting the party secretary of People's Bank of China, Guo Shuqing, where he stated that China will ease crackdown on fintech companies given their importance in the post-pandemic economic recovery undergoing in China. Thus, Chinese government seems to have caught in a dilemma between the need to nurture private fintech companies on the one hand and the potential negative impact that the digital yuan will have on these companies on the other hand. Hence, it will be interesting to see how China tackles these challenges in the coming years without affecting its post-pandemic recovery efforts. On a broader scale, launch of digital currency will also have some fundamental implications on China's domestic economy in terms of its monetary policy transmissions as well as overall financial stability. As the digital yuan aims to replace circulation of physical currency in China, it may create a short-term instability in Chinese economy during this transition. Digital yuan will also have impact on Chinese as well as on the foreign businesses operating within China. Moreover, the impact of digital yuan will certainly not be limited to China's domestic boundaries, given the fact that China is already engaged in cross-border initiatives like multiple CBDC projects, along with the Hong Kong, Thailand, and UAE. Also, China will be eager to promote digital yuan through its transnational initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative. There have also been debates about the impact of digital yuan on China's efforts to internationalize its currency. As the second largest economy, any changes in Chinese economy are bound to have some impact on the global economy. Thus, many experts believe that China's digital yuan initiative will have major impact on expanding the base of yuan at a global level. But on the other hand, yuan constitutes for only around 3% of global currency reserve as per IMF data, which makes some experts also believe that launch of digital yuan may not necessarily result into internationalization of its currency and may not replace dollar's dominance, at least in the near future. However, it is a fact that China has been attempting to gain global acceptance for its digital currency, evident from its pilot projects run during the 2022 Winter Olympics at Beijing, as well as at several international exhibitions held in China in the last 3 years, which has received a relatively positive response from its international users. Hence, considering China's global footprint, digital yuan project is certainly crucial not only for the domestic economy, but also for the global economy. This panel, which is a part of ORCA's broader project focusing on assessing the nuances attached to China's digital yuan initiatives, will explore the challenges for the digital yuan nationwide launch, as well as its implication for the China's domestic as well as for the global economy in the coming years. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Cheng to begin her presentation and share her views. Thank you.
Thank you, Omkar. I will share the PowerPoint. No, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Wait. Great. So, sorry, I need to put my PowerPoint here. Okay. So hi everyone. It's my honor to be invited by Omkar to participate in this wonderful scholars dialogue. I'm really look forward to Professor Zhang's insightful thoughts on this topic. Today, I would like to share my opinions about challenges for China in launch of digital yuan. So what is digital yuan? The digital yuan is a type of central bank digital currency which is issued by a central bank. In China's case, it's People's Bank of China, or PBOC. It is a virtual money in digital form and different from other digital currencies. The CBDC is centrally controlled and supervised by the central bank. There is a lot of literature written about CBDC with its advantages and disadvantages. But as you can see, so far, CBDC has more advantages than its disadvantages. Today, as we are discussing the challenges it poses, I will talk more about financial data and user privacy related to China's digital yuan. So here I summarize several features of digital yuan in China. Firstly, it has a retail model with a two-tier system, which means that targeted users of digital yuan is both individual and financial institutions. It requires authorized financial intermediaries to exchange and circulate digital yuan to the public, while the central bank is responsible for the issue and centralized management. Second, the use of digital yuan includes domestic and cross-border transactions. Third, the technology it uses is a combination of distributed ledger technology and centralized management. And finally, it is cash-like controllable anonymity currencies, which means that the identity of digital yuan users is controllable anonymity, which it has high-value transactions. It will be traced by the central bank. Here, I use 4 digital currency features to view the Chinese digital yuan pillars. We can see that digital yuan is backed by the sovereign credit of China, so it is very stable. Currently, only invited corporates and residents in pillars can use digital yuan services. They can use digital yuan payment services in their daily transactions, such as making payments through QR code or NFC. Finally, it uses a loosely coupled account link to balance the user privacy and financial risk. So it is a controllable anonymous connection between users' commercial bank accounts and their digital wallets. More specifically, as we can see from this chart, people can register with their phone number to use digital yuan, but there are some restrictions on the amount they can trade. The more information you provide, the larger amount of digital yuan you can transact. So it is a controllable anonymity. Users can select whether to provide more information based on their transaction needs. The regulatory challenges of launching the digital yuan are mainly reflected in the gap between personal information protection law in China and digital yuan pillar implementation policies. For example, the PIPL Article 7 states that the processing of personal identifiable information needs to comply with the principles of clear reasonable purpose and the minimum and impact scope. But when we see the digital yuan policies, some of the personal information collected by the bank, such as mobile device model and operating system, may not be necessarily comply with the principles listed in PIPL, and the bank have not provided any explanations on the necessity and the reasonableness of their collection. The second challenge with the launch of digital yuan is the lack of specific distinction between personal information. China's PIPL strictly defines the requirements for processing sensitive information. When using digital yuan, it is clear that relevant authorized financial institutions collect sensitive information from digital yuan users. However, there is no specific commercial bank operational processes and related obligations in the pillar's customer information protection policy, which may result in a regulatory gap in the protection of sensitive information of digital yuan users. The third potential regulatory challenge is related to the deletion of personal information. According to PIPL, the collected personal information is required to be returned or deleted by the processor when the commission contract is terminated. But when we look at the commercial bank policy, it stated that if the service is terminated, the commercial bank will stop collecting anonymous the previously collected information or continue to use the previous information when it related to archiving, auditing, anti-money laundering, co-supervising, etc. But in PIPL, anonymous personal information means that it is undefinable and cannot be recovered after anonymous processing. The notice stipulated that all virtual currency related activities are illegal financial activities, while banning cryptocurrencies may facilitate the launch of the digital yuan. I don't think this is the only reason for the government to ban them. I guess the main reasons are the increasing risk that cryptocurrency pose to the Chinese financial system and the high energy consumption of cryptocurrency mining operations. And the second question is how digital yuan affected the recent trend of crackdown on fintech companies by the Chinese government. The crackdown of fintech companies started in 2020 when Chinese regulators suspended Ant Group's IPO for its highly financial risks. Similarly, Chinese government's crackdown on fintech companies have several reasons, such as anti-monopoly, curbing financial risks, and protecting data. There's no clear causal link between the launch of the digital yuan and the crackdown on fintech companies. But certainly, when people don't trust the safety and the security of Alipay and WeChat payments due to the crackdown on fintech companies, this may in turn contribute to the popularity of the digital yuan. So this is all I have to share. So Omkar, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cheng, for an interesting presentation. You have rightly brought out different challenges, regulatory as well as non-regulatory, for the launch of digital yuan in China. And it also brings out the regulatory gaps that the Chinese government need to fill before it promotes digital yuan further, also within the cross-border payments. So you have covered a very holistic view about the challenges that face in Japan. So thank you for the presentation. Now I would like to invite Dr. Wang to share his views on the digital yuan initiative.
Well, thank you very much. And also I really appreciate the invitation. And also I think that's actually Pangyue has given a very informative and very useful insightful discussion of the E-CNY, so I can it's a great foundation, which I will build on. And so what I would like to talk is about, the E-CNY in terms of the implications, which is I would like to explore, what is the implication for domestic, but more for international economy. So what I will go is that I will discuss briefly about, the practice of the China E-CNY or digital yuan, and then look into the features and approach, and then to explore the implications. So firstly, let's look into the practice of the E-CNY. That is, E-CNY is, if you look into the practice, where E-CNY has taken a two-tier system, so which means that the central bank will rely on commercial banks, or including those related telecommunication operators to distribute the E-CNY to the end users. So you could see that actually, Central Bank of China, PBOC, and then we'll go through the tier 2.0 institution like ICBC, BOC, those major Chinese banks, and also including internet banks, related to Ali, Tencent. And then you have tier 2.5 institution, which are those institutions which are operating with they are other commercial banks. They work with tier 2.0 institution to disseminate or to distribute the money to the businesses and consumers at end users. So tier 1, Central Bank of China. Tier 2, operating institutions, large state-owned banks to internet banks. Tier 2.5, other banks and payment service providers. These tier 2.5 institutions will work with tier 2.0 institution to provide services to the E-CNY users, so they include business and consumers. And then if we look into the international context, China, for example, is working with Bank for International Settlements, Innovation Hub in Hong Kong, and also with the Monetary Authority of Hong Kong, SCR, and also the central banks of UAE and Thailand on the M-Bridge project. So which is basically a wholesale, because which means that they are CBDC used by the financial institutions. They will serve the corporate clients. So that's one of the China's efforts, to test whether they can have a common platform for using digital currencies, across the border. So they actually involve 4 currencies, besides Chinese RMB, but also other 3 currencies. And the first test case was about, international trade settlements, because that's obvious reason that they can drive down costs, but also you face challenges in terms of, how can you discover the foreign exchange pricing, because actually you have to still solve the issue about pricing, foreign exchange, currency conversion issue, and also an issue like some central bank only requires the CBDC to be settled in one, you cannot have overnight CBDC. So basically you have finished that within 1 day, but you have a different operating hours. So that makes it difficult. And the commercial banks will have a lot of pressure, in that regard to finish in time. And also, the third point I would like to talk about, I talk about the domestic and international practice, is what China's CBDCs features. Obviously, I think the first one is the role of the state. So it's China on one hand prohibits the cryptocurrencies, as Pangyue already mentioned, and also in the ECNY or digital yuan is led by China's central bank, including the policy and standards regarding digital wallets. And even for international, I mentioned about M-Bridge project. They're different from others in terms of they are built according to the report of M-Bridge report. It's built by central banks and for central banks. So that's different from other platform where it could be built by non-central banks. So that shows a way where state played a very important role. And that also echoes an issue, which includes the implication issue. What's the role between state market, in that regard? And second feature is about, cross-border use of ECNY, where, China is using existing mechanisms, new mechanisms. So for example, I mentioned earlier, M-Bridge is kind of the new mechanisms. In terms of existing ones, China also may explore whether they can be used, along the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, because they have report by China Daily that China is interested promoting those kind of CBDC standards along some of the BRI countries, and also in terms of the cross-border, this feature of second feature, which is possible cross-border use of CNY, and China will likely take advantage of technology network. China's being a first mover, in ECNY, in CBDC, but also China has been leader in terms of wide use of cashless payment. A third feature of China's CBDC is about proactiveness in international governance. So China has proposed principles like no detriment and others. And also China is the first to add digital currency related content to the repository for ISO 2022, a new international financial information transfer standards. So it's kind of way not only about practice, but also about emerging standards in terms of financial information. And also China suggests G20 should explore CBDC standards and principles. And so that means China has 3 features in terms of its CBDC: role of the state, possible cross-border use of ECNY, and also proactiveness in international governance, like G20, ITU, BIS. And the next point I would like to talk about is what's China's approach to CBDC. One may argue that's a kind of selective reshaping, which means that, different from existing international economy or international financial order. That means that it could lead to reduced reliance on the US dollar, because actually, ECNY, that helps to, build direct link, as you think about M-Bridge project, between China and the UAE, China and Thailand, without going through intermediary currencies like Euro or US dollar. So there can be a kind of the, reshaping in that regard. And also I think that's the reshaping can include, the selective reshaping can means shaping the future of CBDC framework. Because, if you look into the traditional or international economy where US is a leader, obvious for CBDC is different scenarios because US do not necessarily see the need for that. Because US dollar is a dominant use one in the world. And China is leading in that regard. But the US position is that, they want to do that correctly. So we'll see whether there will be first mover advantage or later mover advantage. Because as we see just now, they have a cyber security issue, for example. You have issue, how do you make sure they don't have implication for commercial banks, particularly when you have a financial crisis or distress. How do you make sure that, the money will not rush to the CBDC? Even if you can say, okay, I keep a cap on that, but people may still be able to get away from that. And also think about, they don't need to go to ATM. They can use their app. So very quickly, so the implication could be very profound. And also think about early last year, they have an issue, technical issue with some, digital currency, CBDC, some digital currency cannot operate for about 2 months. You cannot imagine that would be a disaster for economy because of fiat currency. So there's a lot of open questions in that regard. And also there are, so that's what I call the selective reshaping, may reduce reliance on dollar, may shape future, CBDC framework because China is a first mover. But at the end of the day, it depends on, how it goes. We'll see whether they will take off or not. And also for driving force, I think obviously the role of the state is a major one. And also I think that's in terms of how do they make those selective reshaping, I think that includes the possible international use of ECNY and also China's approach, proactive approach in affecting international governance, as I mentioned earlier. And also you may ask, how do we understand what's the influencing factors? I think that's some of them, including a perception and conception. So what does it mean? It means that how China understand, digital currency, because ECNY is not built from scratch. They're still built upon, learn from cryptocurrencies, Bitcoins, DLT and others. And also that's about perception, how to perceive previous or other digital currency. Also about conception, because China is a first mover, then you have to conceive, what's the path you will go, how to build your own structure, which technology you will use, right? Because they'll be different from private cryptocurrency, how to deal with financial, I mentioned earlier, disintermediation issue, cybersecurity issue. And also, so that's about perception, understand what's happening, but also about conception, conceive new ideas. The second influencing factor is about complementarity with China's preferences. So, China wants to increase its role in international governance, particularly regarding finance. China is a major trading country, a lot of exports of fund, of investment, but China is not yet of international monetary power. So that's a kind of, priority. And also China wants to promote finance and trade. So that's the reason why you see that, they use this ECNY in pilots to support trade. And that helps China to promote finance and trade. And also a third one is that China's preference is probably about to respond to external dynamics. Think about U.S. possible sanction, against some of Chinese financial institutions. So how China respond to that if they don't allow to use U.S. dollar, so ECNY may be one way of, as a solution. So these are second influencing factor, complementarity of CBDC with China's preferences. Third factor is about legitimacy, because you have to choose that, if you're a new game changer, you enter into this market, how do you justify, right? Why, the order will be different, the landscape will be different. So I explain maybe why China, proactively also working with international organization institutions including a joint venture between PBOC related institution, central bank related institution with SWIFT, which is pre-existing financial messaging system that can show that, okay, we stick to high standards or they work with international organization like Bank for International Settlements. And finally, they also have an influencing factor about institutional capacity, whether you have the capacity to do so. That not only rely on Central Bank of China, but also rely on other players in the ecosystem, including commercial banks, whether you can ensure cybersecurity and other issue. And also, if you look into international use of CBDC, the problem also involve how your partner, in banks, in other jurisdictions, are able to stick to the standards, including restriction on access to the system. You may not allow everyone to access your system, including how do you do this sanction check, KYC, know your customer check, cybersecurity, and so on and so forth. And in terms of the next issue about implications, what are they? I think I just given time constraint, I just lay out some of the perspective. We can look into that. One is economic perspectives, issue like domestic, internationally, what are the related costs? How do you there's an issue of apportionment of costs and revenues. How do you recover the cost? CBDC will cost money, and also you have to build a resilient system. When you improve the system, the potential cyber attack also increase may increase their capacity. They may need more inputs, who will pay and buy the bill, and not only in one country, but in other countries, And the second issue in terms of economic implication for the markets, So for example, how do you deal with, CBDC with or without expiry date, and what does it mean for competition in the payment markets, domestically, internationally, and also have a macro financial implication like spillover effects. If CBDC works well or not in one country, they are likely to affect another country because you can hardly stop in a customer or border to say, let's check your wallet. It's not possible for CBDC. And also other issue like confidence. A second perspective looking into implications about political economy. So what's the role of the state, of the market? How do you make sure that it's a proper balance? For international economy, it's even more challenging because you think about Russia, US, EU. If you look into the digital currency sphere, they have different scenarios. Yeah, so they can be very challenging. And currency and payment solution relationships, and also international relations, geopolitical, geoeconomic ones will also affect the use of CBDC, internationally. And final perspective or understanding or exploring implications about legal regulatory factors like resilience, how do you make sure it's a stand cyber attack, offline transactions, how do you make sure it's not double spent, because even you use a cell phone for offline payments, but what happens is being hacked, or I just, reset the cell phone. How do that mean? Interoperability issue, adaptability issue to risks like data leakage, international coordination, privacy protection, and also sustainable developments. How do you make sure CBDC itself is environmentally friendly? And because we are now see so many crises in environment, and how do you make sure that we have a proper technology of CBDC which help to fight against climate change instead of bring many e-wastes of CBDC, because you think a lot of consumption of devices, of CBDC, because it is different from cash. I come to India, I use my cash, but for CBDC you need infrastructure, and these are possible implications for environment. And they are very narrow window of opportunity where you try to design environment friendly technology, because if the infrastructure already established, like what we see ATMs, others, you cannot say, okay, let's go to remove them and use a new technology. That doesn't work. To conclude, I think that's actually we are seeing a lot of new challenges. because CBDC means that you may have more connections. If you use that internationally, you have a linkage. It's not only about currency, it's about data, it's about infrastructure, standards. So if I use your smaller country cannot afford to develop their own system, they will rely on bigger economies for their standards, their IP, their CBDC system. Once you have those link, infrastructure reliance or pass dependence, it's hard to break it. So that's an involvement issue: national security, sustainable. What happens if a cyber attack? Who pays the bill down the track? And in the long term, at the very beginning, it may be easy, but we will see what happens. It's about many years, 50 years or longer. And also the issue about are we like to see a parallel system, US led order, and China may be different, And I would like to see, a network where a decentralized system where you don't like a dominant currency as before. But essentially, trust is crucial. It's very tricky. We need a lot of international cooperation to deal with crises like cyber and terrorist financing. But now the international relation makes that extremely difficult. So I will stop here and look forward to more discussion. And also I will share a link of my publication in case some of you want to read that on that. Thank you.
Thank you also to Dr. Wang for such an insightful presentation. Right when you covered the features of digital yuan that were revealed through the pilots that in China, and also you also mentioned about prospects and as well as the challenges for the cross-border payments that China may face. Also, how the RMB internationalization process is not that will not become easy through the use of digital yuan, but it will have its own challenges and situations that it had to deal with. So thank you about the holistic presentation. Now, before I move to questions that we have in the chat box, I would like to have one question to each of the panelists, and then we can move on to the questions from the audience. So my question for Dr. Wang is related to the features or the design of digital yuan that you have mentioned about the tier system, where tier 1 is represented by People's Bank of China, which manages the issuance of the digital yuan. In the second tier, there will be selected commercial banks which will manage the whole distribution of the digital yuan currency. And there will be a tier 2.5 where small commercial banks will have some role to play in the digital yuan system. So this system is referred to as by some experts as the financial disintermediation of banks, as there are only few banks which will be allowed to operate directly with the digital yuan systems. So my question is, how will this digital yuan initiative or this transition from physical currency to digital currency affect the overall banking structure of China? And how will the small commercial banks find their place or adjust themselves to the new digital payment, new digital yuan system? And for Ms. Cheng, my question is about the controllable anonymity that you mentioned in your presentation. It is also mentioned in the white paper that this managed anonymity will mean that certain transactions up to a certain limit will not have any traceability. About a certain limit will be traced by the regulators. So how does this anonymity thing fits into China's data protection laws, and will that need any substantial amendments in the existing laws? And as the nationwide launch of digital yuan is taking place, will this feature continue to hold, or will it undergo certain amendments as we move forward? So I guess we can start with Mr. Wang.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a really crucial and also very important question. Probably not only for China, but also for other countries which are exploring CBDC. So yes, as you rightly pointed out, ECNY and also most of I think that's actually likely to be passed away by most, if not all, central bank that will issue CBDC, or considering that possibility that you have tier 1, which is central bank, and then you rely on tier 2 operating institutions to disseminate using CBDC to the end users if they choose the retail CBDC that'll be used by the public. For China's case, tier 1, there are more detailed. Tier 1 is Central Bank of China, People's Bank of China. Tier 2.0 are operating institutions, large state-owned banks, and 2 internet banks. They are responsible. Tier 1 will issue CBDC. Tier 2.0 institution will open ECNY wallets, will disseminate ECNY, and will be responsible for know your customer, check, and also like technology, updates, because you have to use those infrastructure which you have been responsible for. And tier 2.5 are other banks, which are not tier 2.0. So they are smaller banks, or could be foreign banks. Their reports, they may have a limited number, because and also payment service providers. Tier 2.5, they have to work with tier 2.0. So basically, so you cannot operate directly. So tier 2.5 will provide service to ECNY users, but while collaborating with tier 2.0, because they have to get those kind of ECNY, and then to distribute that to, provide the service to the end users. Yes, they will have the implication about, because who will shape the standards? Central bank will have the general standards for digital wallet, but you still rely on commercial other banks to develop their own, practice use cases. And with their first mover advantage, I enter into market area, will that be good for me? And also have the issue about, how do you have a criteria to decide who will enter first? So they have implications for a relationship of the state and the markets, but also about the competition. So that's the issue that probably needs a lot of thoughts and there are long-term implications here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. Ms. Cheng, would you like to answer?
Yes, as for the controllable anonymity, as I presented before, nowadays the central bank have 4 levels that for the customers or the other like commercial institute, the financial institutions to choose. The more information you provide to the central bank, the more amount of money that you can transact, but that's the controllable anonymity. So it's related to the privacy protect. Actually, it's about the personal information protection. It gives customers to choose whether to share or provide their own information to the central bank. And up to now, it still have the 4 levels, but I think it's really depend on the future, how it works. When the bank provides such kind of 4 levels, the amount of the transactions they will provide and the information that they require the customer to provide, such kind of standards may be changed in the future if the central bank found the amount of transaction is too low or too large. Yeah, they will depend, look and see. So it's still in the pillars. So they will see the how it works in the pillars, and then they may demand the remand or change some of the criteria of these controllable anonymity levels. Yeah.
question from the audience. It's asked by Ashwin, and I think Dr. Wang can reply to that. The question next goes, the Russia-Ukraine war has made countries uneasy given the swiftness with which Russia was removed from SWIFT and the dollar system. So can China's digital currency gain prevalence in areas such as Africa, where increasingly countries and regions are looking for alternatives to the dollar? And we have another question from Anuprita for Dr. Wang. It says, what would be the possible impact of digital yuan on private players, private fintech companies such as Alibaba and Tencent? So, Dr. Wang, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you very much. I got the second question, but do you mind to sorry, I repeat a little bit about the first question?
First question, okay.
Yeah. Because I cannot see that in the chat, so when I check that, I just miss a little bit about
it asked about the Russia-Ukraine war has made countries uneasy given the swiftness and with which Russia was removed from the SWIFT system as well as from the dollar system. So can China's digital currency gain prevalence in Russia and as well as in areas where countries are increasingly looking for alternatives to the dollar system?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I think this is a really great question. It's two of them. First, I think that's about international use of e-CNY. I just want to see that obviously with the international relations dynamics or geopolitical situations, they will have some needs, for using different currency than US dollar, because they are concerned about, the sanctions or the other compliance requirements. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is that, the US dollar, for example, they are also considering the possibility of digital dollar. And also, other countries, like UK, England, Bank of England, ECB, European Central Bank, also look into those kind of possibilities. So it's remains to be seen, of some of them will want to look into alternative, new CBDC. And some of them will see, okay, I may want to stick to existing dominant one. So international relations actually will affect that. And also secondly, that also about the issue of whether you have trust. User will vote by feet. So for example, you have a very high requirements actually for CBDC international use, because if you are used for wholesale, it means a very large amount of payments. You need extreme stability. So any glitch in the system can cause a huge blow to that cyber attack and others. So we like to see a possible parallel or fragmented than before. I think that's a possible way, but there are also a lot of uncertainties. Depends on how and whether the CBDC will operate smoothly, because as already seen that in different cross-border CBDC projects, there's still a lot of challenges, and also to see how they will be persuaded to use. And secondly, regarding the possible impact of digital yuan on private players, I think yes, there will be one challenging for the central bank to persuade users, because if they already use a private, industry provided payments, channels or rails, and why they should choose to ship to another one. So, at the very beginning, you may provide financial incentives. I give you the digital, I give you kind of the red pockets, you can save your money. But what happens if they're not really available anymore, because you cannot subsidize all the time? And that's whether you have stickiness of the users in that regard, because whether you can, because usually private sector are more innovative than central banks. Central banks are not in the position to be innovator. I mean, they'll be about regulator. And also they have other issue, as Pangyue mentioned earlier, also privacy. whether you have concern or you have confidence in the privacy protection, and in that regard, so there are a lot of uncertainties. But I think that they definitely will have some impacts. For example, I think that the eCNY will not have charge for use of eCNY, by an individual user. There are no transaction fee, and they may have a pressure on private sector that you have to lower your charges, because if they choose another one, there's no charge. Why do you will charge on that? And also they have another implication for data, because eCNY use controlled anonymity, means that private sector will not be able to access the data, because the central bank can access that, but not the private sector. And then they have implication for private sector, because data is a new oil, and you are not able to leverage that as before. So they could have a profound implications, And obviously, another side, CBDC also have an issue about, how to make sure that's profitable for commercial banks. So they also have their own, so either side have their advantages, disadvantages. But CBDC means that private sectors will have more competition, may have less access to data, which can be new scenarios, and they have a profound implication in down the track. Thank you.
Right. You permit, can we take last two questions, one for each speaker? So this question is for Ms. Cheng. Says, what are the legal and regulatory implications of digital yuan in the context of money laundering or terror financing? And will these escape the Western-led watchdogs like FATF? And for Dr. Wang, the question by Ramanand Sen Gupta, it asks, given the current animosity between the West and China, do you think it might make sense to have a digital currency which is managed by more than one country, like perhaps the BRICS nations? And do all these countries have the digital backbone needed for this such kind of initiative? So, Ms. Cheng, probably you can go first.
Yes, one of the major reasons that the CBDC issue is the central bank issue is CBDCs trying to control the criminal activities, including the money laundering. So when you issue the digital currency, it is more easier for the government and the central bank to track the money transactions. So I think the issuance of the CBDC or the digital yuan can facilitate the central bank and the authority to track the criminal activities. So yeah, that's what my answer.
Dr. Wang?
Yes, thank you. I think this is another great question. And also, I think they already have some discussion about whether it's have possible to have a digital currency. I guess here it means central bank digital currency, which is managed by over one country. Let me know if I understand it's not correct. I think that's actually theoretically possible, but in reality, there are a lot of roadblocks or challenges. So give one example, I think digital currency, CBDC, reflects actually the governance. So, it's not only about, say, let's shift the money into, say, digital version. It's more about, CBDC, as mentioned earlier, if you use that in India, so that means you cannot carry cash, you have to use equipment, facility. They have an issue about how do you access digital identity. So if I think every state will, even every commercial bank will be responsible for KYC, know your consumer, anti-sanction check, anti-terrorist financing one. Then you have the issue about, how they will be understood the same way. For national security, for example, different countries have different understanding. And it's hard to, to have a universal standards. And also secondly, for data, you have a lot of issues like data protection or privacy protection. in terms of the privacy protection, different countries have also different approach to that and different incentives actually. So some central banks say that we will stay away from that because I'm a central bank, I don't feel comfortable, or I don't think there's a need for us to understand more detail because that involves privacy. So there's another challenge, in terms of data privacy standards. And also central banks, I think there's another central bank senior official mentioned earlier in a public event saying that we want a 100% control of our infrastructure, our transaction details, because it's really crucial. And then how do you deal with that? And also, so that's about data, that about regulation, that about also technical capacity, whether you're able to maintain a high level of capacity to dealing with that. And also, how about the issue like IP and other standards, and so I think that's it's quite challenging. Even to roll out a CBDC in a domestic context, let alone to do that in an international one. And also another I want to add is that you have a very high requirements for stability, for security. How can you manage that? I think that's probably one of the reasons why there are a lot of hesitation by central banks, because it's really, you have a lot of technology uncertainty. This is untested technology, and it's blow in economy in terms of the technological crisis will be deadly. So these are a lot of uncertainties in that regard, and also even for offline payment. Currently, the technology using that, you use a digital wallet, offline one, but you can only use up to a certain, times, up to a certain amount. Then you have to get online and to, upload and to online your ledger, and that doesn't really work very efficiently. And also in remote area, it's probably better to use cash, isn't it? Because you use a CBDC facility, you need another utility to use that. So there's a lot of open issue. So I just want to explore that a lot of question mark, and so that makes it a little bit challenging. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. I don't think we have more questions in the chat box, so I guess we can wrap up the session. I'd like to thank both the speakers for your valuable time and for helping us understand different nuances of digital yuan, both in the domestic sector as well as at the global level. I would also like to extend my gratitude to the audience for patiently listening to the presentation and also for engaging with the speakers during the Q&A session. I hope you have enjoyed the discussion and gained some valuable insights about the theme, that is digital yuan. Hoping to see you all again in ORCA's future event. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Cheng. Thank you, Dr. Wang.